Hey there, I'm John Zimmerman with Upper Creek Angler and the Partridge of Redditch International Pro Team. Today we're going to be tying my go-to Caddis fly. I keep this fly in sizes 10 down through 18, and the color spectrums and everything else about it make it a great caddis imitation for just about any of the caddis flies that I meet in my neck of the woods. For purposes of video and all of that, we're going to be tying it on a size 10, and this is the Partridge of Redditch Standard Dry number 10 SLD2. It's the barbless. For the thread on this, because I'm gonna cinch down a lot of materials at the top of the fly, I'm gonna be using some 12-0 nano silk, and this is in olive. It really doesn't matter one bit what color you use for this, because all of the thread material is going to be covered up. This is a bug that requires only a bare few materials. For the, it's not a tail, but egg sac, tail, whatever you want to call it, coming off the back of the fly, we're going to use some Antron yarn. We'll tie this in at the back and lash it down all the way up the shank of the hook. One of the things that I always like to do in fly tying is use waste material to help me not only create the taper of the fly, but avoid taper problems like big bumps at the back or tie-in points. So that is it's going to be our egg case at the back. We'll just come back here and start tying in a few more materials. Our ribbing is going to be small copper wire. This is the UTC small and just regular copper color. If you wanted something to stand out a little bit more brightly, you could certainly use one of the other colors, but this is standard for me on this fly. The body of this is going to be peacock curl. My dad had a fly tying theory that said if you didn't use peacock curl in the construction of a fly, you ought to start over and try again. So peacock curl is a prominent material of mine. We're going to use 3 strands. We'll clip those little brittle parts off at the end and tie these down. Return our thread to the top. If you'll take these guys and hold them together and give them a little spin, you'll help create a rope for yourself, and they'll go on easier. And I'm just going to use the rotary function on this vise and advance these to the top, not being afraid to lay some wraps of them right on top of one another to help us build up a thread body that is slightly tapered. So that was one wrap behind, one wrap in front. I'm going to, for good measure, make another wrap behind and a couple of securing wraps in front. Nip this out, nip out the waste, and then we'll just bring the copper wire forward, counter wrapping. Despite all of the natural ingredients that are going into this fly, it is has a pretty long lifespan for me. I have a number in my box that have not only seen dozens and dozens of fish, but multiple days on the river. So we'll go in and helicopter this small wire out, and I do keep a pair of cheap scissors at the desk when things like that happen and it doesn't come out quite how I wanted it to. So now we're gonna go in, and you can tell I didn't tie any hackle in, and it's not because I forgot, it's because we're not using any of it in this fly. The great thing about the way that this fly operates in the water is that the body of the fly sits right down in the film, and the CDC and elk that we're going to use help prop it up. So it's super visible in the water because you've got a big bush of elk and CDC that are propping it up, but it sits right down in the water film instead of being pushed up on top of the water like a lot of the hackled caddis flies do. So we're going to line up for the size 10. I'm going to line 4 CDC feathers up. For the size 12s and 14s, I use 3 CDC feathers. For 16s and 18s, I use 2 CDC feathers. So we'll line these up, and we're going to put these just even with where the little egg sac dials in. Go in and catch those. A couple solid turns, pull back, and make a couple solid turns in front. Now we're going to leave these dangling on us out there for just a moment so that we can make one clip when we clip out both the elk and the CDC. Certainly you could use deer hair if you wanted to for this. I've got this huge patch of elk hair that needs to get some use, so if you'll go in and just weed out some of those guard hairs, it'll make your life easier, and it'll turn out to be a nicer finished fly if you get rid of some of those guard hairs. Take a couple tamps with a hair sacker. And I do have a big bush of these, which I intend to really keep that. And I'm going to lay these down just even and flush with the back of the CDC. And we'll go in and make several securing wraps on top. And that's the great part about this nano thread on hair flies, is you can really make some tough wraps and have no worries about it breaking. So we'll now go in and clip all of these out at an angle. So if you'll pull them up, clip them all out at an angle, create a little head on this fly. Need a little bit more hair cutting there and there. And to add, you can see this fly is going to float like a cork. To add to the realism, I do not think this has any difference on fish catching, and they often don't last much longer than 3 or 4 fish, but I do like to tie in a couple pheasant tail fibers on top, just to mimic the antenna, the long antennae on most caddis flies. I guess actually all caddis flies. One more on the other side. And clip that out. And then just to finish this guy off, we're going to add just a spot of dubbing to the and you could use any number of colors just to add a little bit of contrast to everything else going on. I'm going to use one of my favorite dubbing colors, and it is the red bloody black. Love this dubbing color. We'll just dub right over where this thread base came to a hilt on the caddis, on the the elk hair. And to finish this off, as we make our way to the top of the fly to tie in our knot, I'm gonna make some wraps into the elk hair and into the CDC, just to finish cementing all of that stuff in place. tie in a first turn whip finish here. And we are close to done. To finish that off, we'll take just a little bit of Zap-A-Gap on the thread for our final whip finish. So you can see with all the stuff that we have going on at the top of this fly, leaving yourself plenty of room to tie your knot off and finish the bug up top is crucial. So these guys, you can pull them back down and they'll point forward. This is going to ride right in the surface film. And the way that I like to treat the fly so that it rides, it rides for a long time and stays nice and fluffy on me, is I'll pull these elk hair caddis fibers back right before I'm ready to dress it and drop some of the liquid CDC floatant right into the CDC feathers, and then coat the rest of the fly with some of the better silicone coatings like Dry Magic. Really like that stuff. And then as it needs some extra, some shake or some frog fanning. So this, I have caught a bazillion fish on this fly. It's excellent for dry dropper rigs. It's an excellent standalone caddis fly when you're just wanting to cast a single caddis or a single dry. Fish eat it up, and I think a lot of it is because it sits right down in the surface film. So try this fly out, experiment with different colors of CDC, certainly experiment with different body materials instead of just the peacock curl, and these pheasant tail barbs for antennae at the top are admittedly mostly cosmetic. So y'all have fun tying this fly. It catches a lot of fish for me. I know it will for you too.